Did I really
Hey,
just
welcome
forget that
back. I'm
melody?
Darren Bacon. Today I'm going to be going over the complete process for this sketch I posted online a few weeks back. I'll be doing a breakdown of the whole thing start to finish and even take it a little further in Photoshop. If you like this content, please let me know. Like, subscribe, ring the bell icon, and let's check this out. Thanks for joining me today. Okay, so this is the really primitive sketch that I was doing. It was just enough to get a thought down, and then I'm going to use this as my sort of base layer. And I'm going to draw over it with another sheet of paper and just kind of use the transparency of the paper to allow me to like use this as a guide. I'm going to run this at 2x speed just so we can get through it. Basically, all I'm doing is Pentel Arts Hybrid Technic 0.4 millimeter pen, and I'm going over my original initial sketch with the marker paper, using it almost like taking advantage of the transparency so that I can have a really good look at the original sketch. And I'm looking for shapes mostly. So I'm going to try to like come up with as many cool shapes as I can. And I'm using the kind of blurry transparency under sketch as a guide. And I'm just sort of like squinting my eyes and trying to find some interesting shapes and to make sense of it all in my, well, I guess it's a final line sketch. So yeah, that's basically what I'm thinking about is how can I edit my original sketch to have something that is unique, original, and really cool, defined shapes, and make sense of the mess that sort of I started in my initial scribble. And I'm thinking a lot about economy of line work, and just how I can get across as much information as I can with the least amount of pen strokes. And so yeah, like that's why you'll see me try to like keep my pen almost like stuck to the paper at times, and that's just because I'm really mindful of that economic pen work, and that's sort of what I'm trying to keep the sketch all about. And here I'm just kind of trying to indicate some really loose perspective, nothing crazy. I'm not doing any draw throughs or anything like that. This is, by and large a side view with just a slight turn on the camera. So I'm just going to try to kind of make it work. And a lot of time, like if I kind of like slowed down or zoomed in and tried to make too much sense of this, then it would almost kill the flow of the sketch it would just get too bogged down and too noodly. So I don't want to let myself become noodly. And by that, I mean like just, stuck on some detail. I really want to keep it loose and gestural so that the viewer's eye kind of fills in all the detail, because I don't want to necessarily have to do that with the line work. We just kind of want to keep it as simple as possible. And I'm starting at the focal point, which was, the face, and I'm working my way out. I really want that to be that's what's going to really grab the viewer's attention. And so I start there, and I just kind of start to work my way down and around, radiusing out from that focal point area. And once the torso and arm is done, then I start to work on the rest of the sketch. I'm really trying to like think about indicated details, because I don't want to have to go in and design everything. So it's a lot of just indication, like how can I be as economic with my indication as possible, and use the least amount of marks as possible to get the most information across. That's really what this is all about. The other thing to be kind of mindful of is to keep your hand outside of the frame, not just so that you don't get it in the way of the camera, but so you don't run your hand over the actual ink, right? You don't want to start smearing stuff around, so you have to be really careful of that. Okay, so just to recap what we're doing on this stage, this is the line work that we're going over our original initial sketch with. The initial sketch was scanned and photocopied and made so it was ready to go with this marker paper. We're thinking about shapes. How do we make the coolest shapes possible with the most economic line work that we can? And it's all about indication and indicating detail, indicating function, indicating, those big cool shapes and a hierarchy of shapes, big, medium, and small. And because that just creates contrast and interest for the viewer. So yeah, that's everything that's sort of going on at this stage of the process. This is the solving the design of the sketch. And then next we're going to be going into laying in ink. Okay, so we have our design finalized, we have our line work done, and now it's time to lay in the darks. So I'm using the Sharpie marker to lay in all the dark values of my design, and I'm using this as an opportunity to, you know, even further push the big shape recognition in the image. So I'm going to use the darks to really give me another opportunity to have something to design. So I'm thinking about how can I design these dark shapes to be the coolest shapes possible. So that's just like something that's going through my mind. Is I'm like, okay, this is another great, design challenge, and I'm going to go in and make some changes where necessary, and I can do that because this marker's much heavier than the previous pen I was using. So I've got some leeway here, and I'm still sort of thinking through a lot. This is definitely not like a coasting stage. This is still trying to like really nail and solve the sketch and solve the design, and use shadow shapes to do it. Starting from the top, very similar to when I was doing the line work, I sort of start at the focal point and I work my way out, and I'm just kind of going through it like a math problem, trying to move from one section to the other and solve bits and pieces that make sense. And then when I get one sorted out, then I move on to the next phase. And I'm doing a lot of thinking about compositional balance, like just like composition in the design. So I will be, adding dark values in places that I want to have weight or where I feel like it needs to be counterbalanced. And I do think about a light source. Like obviously I have indicated a light source overhead from the character, but I am more thinking about design, and I want to indicate in a light source. I want to indicate a shadow side, so I need to be consistent with my choices. But I also have a lot of leeway on how I put marks down, because I want to make sure that the design is cooler than actually having some physically renderable thing, because it's just an illustration. So that's definitely on my mind. I can also think about contrast in design resolution and mark fidelity, right? So you want to be sure that you have a lot of detail where it matters. So like the face, is really important that I nail the detail, because that's kind of what's important to the viewer. But as I get further from the focal point of the image, I can have my marks be more indicated, more gestural, more loose, and less like representative of like something that actually makes sense. So it could even, you could almost just like trail off to scribbles if you wanted to, because it's just not that important for the image to have like, the bottom part here, the lower part of the frame, like super resolved. In fact, I think if you were to spend too much time adding detail and too much time adding information all over the image, that's actually a less impactful image, because you want the eye to kind of move across those areas quickly. And if you were to render every section of the sketch super detailed and super like nailed, I guess, but more just like, sometimes you see images or artists I've done it too, right? Where it's like, you'll just like render the heck out of the whole thing. And then when that happens, it really bogs down the viewer, because we just start to, get stuck at certain points around the image, as opposed to having something that's really fluid and gestural that the eye can kind of move through and enjoy and get to like the next part of the composition that was sort of designed by the artist. All right, so moving on, jumping into Photoshop. The first thing I'm going to do is I just took a picture of this. I'm going to stretch this into perspective and then adjust it with levels and capture with the selection a mask that I use in the layer mask. And here you're seeing live, I'm creating a brush. I needed a marker brush because I wanted to do like a marker brush looking background. So I quickly created this marker brush by going to edit, define brush preset based on that selection I created. And yeah, now it's just a matter of going in and creating a really simple marker background, taking another selection of the overall shape and then using that to drive another layer mask. Really straightforward. And then from there, it's going to be just creating a new layer and starting to paint on top. There's a ton of little errors, right? Like if you're just drawing freehand, and I'm trying to go back in and adjust a few things here and there, like hand placement, grip, kind of the perspective of the arm, and the foreshortening there, trying to make that feel more accurate. And yeah, I'm not really thinking too much about what brush I'm using. Here I just have a really simple rectangular brush to kind of block in some changes. And taking a quick look at the face was really indicated, but I want to be sure I have that making a lot of sense, because it's kind of, important. It's an important part of the sketch. So I really want it to like look great. So I'll just spend some more time there. Dump some value on. I want to get a tiny bit of color, again, just to kind of have some more saturation there to draw the eye, have it be more interesting to the viewer. Quickly dropping in some super subtle values so that I have a bit more form read. This is just like a rough kind of like marker looking block in of some value to make everything feel a bit more dimensional and a bit more like a traditional sketch. That's really all there is to it. And then going back in over the top, and I'm going to try to block in some more of this red color. This is my sort of background accent color. And so I'm going to sketch that in to make it look like it's more traditional marker sketchy. And then I'm going to create another layer mask into it and then kind of erode it away. And that's just, again, trying to make it look like it's a bit more hand-drawn with traditional media. That's basically the look I'm going for. I have an aesthetic in mind, and so I'm trying to achieve that. You can see I'm going to pull a whole selection of this background and do a copy merged and create this like flattened bit of red and then blur it. And the idea here is that to give it look like it's kind of seeping into the paper as if it is, marker bleeding into the marker paper. Obviously, that's not what we're doing, right? It's not traditional media, but it was originally a traditional sketch. So I wanted to kind of have the illusion of that. And so now I have a brush I'm using to kind of distort the edges. And it's just like kind of to rough up all these edges and make it feel noisy and more kind of happy accident. A little bit like it's, rough marker on paper. And then I'm going to use that same brush to kind of indicate in. What I want to do is I want to have like what looks like smoke, like kind of curling off the end of the rifle. And so I'm going to kind of indicate that in there with that brush while I'm in here messing things up and taking some of the pristineness of the digital stuff that I added, because it's like if you go in with a digital brush, it's going to be kind of too perfect. And so the idea is to kind of mess that up as much as you can with this technique of just kind of disturbing it with smudging. Yeah, just more really, really subtle smudging to kind of disturb all of the perfectness. And now I have a gray layer on top that I'm stretching super big because I'm going to set it to overlay, and then lower the opacity super low in the overlay. And that's going to give it a kind of grainy look, again, as if it's on some traditional media, some marker paper. And here I am going back in to try to fix up some of those last bit pieces and sell that smoke curling up off of the end of the rifle. And this is just a normal brush, or a brush I have that I'm using underneath the noise layer. Now that I have everything looking pretty cool, I'm going back in with my sketch brush. It's one from my environment design sketch packs, and I'm just going through and kind of sketching in some really loose indication of an environment behind the figure. And again, just to kind of give another layer of interest to the sketch and a subtle indication of a background. Last minute little tune-ups here and there, nothing super special, just kind of spending some time to fix little errors here and there. More error cleanup, super simple stuff, just trying to get this thing to look and feel good at first glance. It's getting a little noodly, but I'm going in here and spending some time to clean up small little details just because I want to make sure that everything really reads clean and super clear at first read. And so just trying to nail everything as much as I can. And here I am just adding a bit more detail to that rifle to give it a little more visual interest. Hopping up to clean up the face. I'm just bouncing around the image to tune things up and get it into a really good spot where I'm almost done. And that's pretty much it. So this covers basically what I would be doing to kind of tune up a traditional sketch and get it into a good spot where I'm happy with to share it, whether it be with a client or just for fun. This is more or less the kind of process I take. And here's the finished painting. I enjoyed sketching this. I hope you got something out of it. And take a look at my website, darrenbacon.com/FAQ for more info. And visit me on social with the links provided. Yeah, I'm Darren Bacon from Concept Department. See you next time.